They were monks in armor, sworn to poverty, chastity, and obedience. They prayed in silence, lived in communal houses, and fought as elite warriors for Christ. And yet, somehow, the Knights Templar became the richest and most powerful organization in medieval Europe. So rich, in fact, that kings borrowed from them. Popes shielded them, and their sudden destruction on a single Friday the 13th still fuels conspiracy theories today. But the truth is stranger than the myths, because the Templars didn't just stumble into wealth. They built a financial machine, the first real multinational bank in European history, and like every financial empire, they rose on trust, secrecy, and innovation, until the day politics crushed them. The story begins in 1119, in the aftermath of the First Crusade. Jerusalem was in Christian hands, and pilgrims were streaming into the Holy Land. But the journey was dangerous. Bandits stalked the roads, and carrying gold was basically a death sentence. Enter the Templars, a small group of knights who vowed to protect pilgrims. They were given quarters on the Temple Mount, hence their name, the Knights of the Temple. At first, they were so poor, legend says 2 knights had to share a single horse. But almost immediately, nobles and kings across Europe began donating land, castles, and money to the order. It was good for the soul, and even better for alliances. By the mid-12th century, the order controlled the states across France, England, and Spain. Monks who prayed also managed vineyards, mills, and farms. And here is the irony. Men sworn to individual poverty were now running one of the largest property portfolios in Europe. The Templars themselves didn't own the riches, but collectively. The order became a corporate giant long before corporations existed. Their first great financial innovation was born from that pilgrim problem. If you were a merchant from Paris heading to Jerusalem, you couldn't carry a chest of coins. So the Templars invented a system that feels shockingly modern. You deposited money at a Templar outpost in your home country and received a coded letter of credit. When you arrived in the Holy Land, you presented the letter and got your money. It was, in essence, a medieval traveler's check. It worked brilliantly. Pilgrims traveled safer, and the Templars built a reputation as the most trustworthy custodians of wealth in Christendom. That reputation grew. Soon, kings weren't just using the Templars as warriors, but as their personal bankers. The Templars made loans to monarchs to fund wars. They accepted deposits from nobles, and they moved money across borders faster and safer than anyone else. Because they answered only to the Pope, they were exempt from local taxes and interference. In effect, they created an independent, trusted, and secretive international financial network that spanned continents. By the 13th century, their fortress in Paris, known simply as the Temple, had become the central bank for the French crown. Kings deposited their wealth there. Nobles stored their jewels there. The order had achieved what every financial institution dreams of: universal trust. They even issued loans. King John of England pawned the crown jewels to the Templars when he ran out of cash. In France, Louis VII financed his crusade with Templar credit. These were kings handing over their collateral to men who had started as humble monks. Their network could mobilize resources across borders faster than any royal treasury. A letter from one commandery could unlock funds from another halfway across Europe, centuries before wire transfers. And because they answered only to the Pope, they existed in a legal gray zone. Kings couldn't tax them. Bishops couldn't interfere. They were a state within a state, but richer and more mobile. In modern terms, they were the first too big to regulate institution. Whispers began to spread. How could men sworn to poverty control such riches? Envy is the tax every financial empire pays, and the Templars had become dangerously enviable. By the early 14th century, no king resented them more than Philip IV of France. His wars had bankrupted his treasury, and his debts to the Templars were piling up. To Philip, the order wasn't just a creditor. It was a rival power that humiliated him. So, Philip plotted. He realized their wealth was their greatest vulnerability. If he could destroy their reputation, he could destroy the debt by destroying the creditor. He cooked up shocking charges: heresy, blasphemy, devil worship. None of it had solid evidence, but that didn't matter. What mattered was framing the Templars not as bankers, but as enemies of God. On Friday, October 13, 1307, Philip struck Across France, his agents arrested hundreds of Templars in a single coordinated raid. Their property was seized. Under torture, confessions were extracted. The Pope, pressured by Philip, officially dissolved the order in 1312. The once mighty Templars were finished. And yet, the treasure, officially, their property was transferred to a rival order, but enormous sums just vanished. Rumors of secret treasure caravans leaving Paris and ships fleeing La Rochelle with gold kept the legends alive. The truth is probably simpler. Wealth was absorbed, hidden, or stolen. But what's undeniable is that the Templars' financial empire ended not because of bad accounting, but because of politics. They had become too rich, too powerful, and too independent. They had learned the oldest rule of money and power. Creditors make enemies, and kings don't like to be in debt. The myths are entertaining, but the reality is even darker. The Templars were destroyed because they were creditors to a king who couldn't pay. The heresy charges were theater. The real crime was being a bank that rivaled the monarchy. And this is where the story echoes through time. Every era has its own Templars' institutions that grow so wealthy and untouchable that states begin to fear them. Think of the giant banking houses of the early 20th century, or the global corporations of today that move capital across borders faster than governments can track. They, too, are too big to regulate. The lesson of the Templars is that financial power always invites envy, suspicion, and eventually, retaliation. So when you hear about too big to fail banks today, remember the Templars. Remember the dawn of Friday the 13th, when centuries of trust were erased by a king's decree, because history doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes. And the rhyme of the Templars is clear. Those who invent the future of money can change the world, but they should never forget that kings will always come for their creditors. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.